Welcome back to the Rollup High Roller community. As always, nothing on the Rollup is to be construed as financial advice. We are just some educators in the DeFi space. Toss us a quick like, give us a share, a repost, send it to a friend who may want to watch this, and finally, give us a sub or a follow. It means the world to help support credibly neutral educational content in DeFi. We're here to educate, empower, and enrich you, and let's jump in.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Rollup. Yeah, that was a little pregame. Did you like that?
I did. I was a fan.
You're getting like hyped up, you know. Actually, I have a question before I just mess it all up. Is it XAI? Or is there a debate?
It's XAI. It's XAI, but it could be either or. It could be XAI or it could be XAI. It could be whatever you want, you know. But I say XAI. There's no centralized authority, though.
Yeah, just the Arbitrum sequencer. That's it. That's the only person we have to bow down to.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, man. So we are here today with our good boy Soby, who I think Rob met as well, but I certainly did in, I think it's 2020 on a boat in Miami, Luke Martin's boat. Good times. And now you've come in a amazing direction with XAI, a Arbitrum Orbit Layer 3. Some really cool news. We're going to dive into Camelot coming over to your chain, which I thought was super based. The recent mint as well from our good friend Sebastian at Paima for their game. And yeah, but I know that there's a lot going on behind the scenes, that you guys started this project some time ago. So perhaps you could kind of just run through how you guys started, and then kind of like switching the name and kind of direction a bit and where you are.
Okay. So we started off as a game studio, and we still are a game studio called X Populous. What will be helpful for people is like X Populous and the XAI Foundation / XAI work similarly the same way that there's Off-Chain Labs and then there's the Arb Foundation. So when we started off as a game studio in 2021, we wanted to build awesome games. We still want to build awesome games with awesome experiences, but we also got really excited about the concept of incentive design around video games and where that fits. Ultimately, we realized that incentives are actually kind of a crazy Pandora's box for games, in the sense that like now you have a financial incentive in games, you're going to have a shit ton of cheaters. You're going to have, like, that's actually the main bear case for crypto gaming, in my opinion, isn't what anything else are people talking about. It's like, hey, can we actually fix the cheating aspect of it, right? One way to tackle that is by building on-chain games, right? Because if there is no server and there's very limited stuff on the client side, people can't like inject weird fucking bullshit and, you know, cheat. You can have like VRF on chain, so no one's like messing with things. All the code is running on the chain that you can't, it's immutable code that you can't change. So we started getting really into building on-chain games to kind of avoid this problem. I'm just excited around the design space around on-chain games in general. I have pretty good relationships and network in the space, and we, you know, went to a bunch of big chain providers, and I think, you know, everyone that's working on standardized app chains or whatever are doing a really good job. You know, subnets have their pros and cons. The Polygon stack has their pros and cons. And we just kind of started doing an analysis of everyone. And somewhere along this process, I was like, why don't we go talk to the Arbitrum guys? This was like a year ago. So this is before even the Orbit initiative. And, you know, we hit it off with them really well, really liked the way that, you know, the Arbitrum tech stack worked and what they had on the roadmap, and organically kind of came together. And we're like, hey, what if, you know, Off-Chain Labs, what if you guys become one of our tech partners and we build this chain together to directly address the needs of game developers, right? Because we had all these pain points that we were like, oh, we really wish this wasn't the case or this wasn't the case. And we also wanted strong partners that, you know, are really experienced in building a blockchain. So this is what XAI was born out of. And, you know, really some of the things that we've changed are, you know, this awesome user experience, this gasless experience for users. There's a protocol enshrined gas subsidy contract that once, you know, governance and all that stuff starts, that the protocol will have control over eventually. And, you know, there's higher gas limits, there's higher contract limits, so you can push what you can do on the chain. There's a few other stuff that we're working on that we haven't announced yet, but yeah, that's kind of the story of it all. Is wanted to build awesome games, realized that, hey, there's some things lacking on the blockchain side, found an awesome partner to build this chain with. And it's a decentralized permissionless protocol, so that, you know, we're one of the core contributors to it, but there's tons of people contributing to it off chain. Camelot, Rarible, a bunch of people are coming and building on the chain, and Pima Studios as well. And we've had, X Populous talks to some of these people because we're all building on the same tech stack. But a lot of this is just happening organically, and people are really excited by it. And I think, yeah, it's been awesome to see, and we're excited where we're going to go over the next couple of years.
Yep. Yeah, we can definitely get into the weeds about Arbitrum Orbit and the tech stack. I just want to point out, like, you mentioned that putting games on chain overcomes this like massive like cheating vector. And I think that's like a two-sided like attack vector. Like you got the participants in the game cheating against the other participants in the game, but then you can take that all the way back to like the centralized game itself, like the game developers that are like nerfing these characters. And that's why Ethereum was born to begin with, right? It was because Vitalik had his World of Warcraft account, like all of his stuff taken away, and his account was nerfed. So you've got like the centralized like game studio that could kind of like attack and cheat its players. And then you have the players that cheat against one another. So yeah, I think putting games on, correct me if I'm wrong here, but putting games on chain addresses both of those concerns.
Yeah, I think to your second point of like, hey, game developers are like doing all these things, and sometimes game players push back. I've actually thought about this back and forth where I'm like, does the community really know better? And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle, where I think actually that the community isn't well equipped in traditional gaming to have the clear picture because they're not getting all the analytics, right? They're not getting all the like the deep analytics, the attribution, or like, the deep data funnel that like League of Legends has, right? Because it's all on their own centralized servers. There's no way for me to like there's no Dune dashboard for like Riot, right? And so I do think that even for my own argument on this stuff, because I try to think back and forth on this, I agree with you in that point of like, hey, empowering players is an interesting experiment. I do think there's like an air of caution on that because like obviously like people just want, some people might not understand why something is being nerfed or balanced, but I feel like that is a good reason to have this transparency, right? That like, hey, maybe the reason why players because I obviously I play a lot of video games, have not had the time to play video games for like 9 months now, unfortunately, but I spend times on forums and you hear people complaining and all this stuff, and you go, oh man, like I don't really know if I want someone like that making decisions, but maybe they're not well equipped to make those decisions because they don't have the clear picture. And I think blockchain and all those types of economies for these future games is going to enable that. And that I'm really excited when we have like the first full scale, fully on chain game, high production quality with a large user base. What is that going to look like? What is that interaction between the player base and now the upgradability of this game? How is that going to intersect? It's going to be really exciting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about ZK rollups for games being like, top of the line in a sense. But it's still so early with like proving costs and times and things. So it makes sense that kind of Arbitrum Orbit L3 was like a logical choice because like you said, when you have all these players trying to do all these different things, I'm curious, like how do you guys think about it from like a blockchain perspective? Like, does every action in a game need to be a transaction? Like, how are you thinking about, I guess, scalability of like me going into a world, or maybe we can use the Pima Studios game as an example and talk a bit more about that generally with regards to like, if I go to like in RuneScape to the general bazaar and buy a sword, okay, that's a transaction. But then if I talk to somebody and like click some buttons, is that also a transaction? Like how do you balance the scalability and things? And maybe you could use Pima as an example with their new game or just in general.
Yeah, I think the important distinction to you for the listeners is like a transaction just means a state change, right? That on the chain, you're just like submitting some input to the blockchain. So even when we use the word transaction, we just mean some way that you're interacting with the blockchain. It doesn't literally need to be a financial transaction or whatever, or even like a null transaction. So within that framework, I think it's really interesting to think about like, do you have everything, right? Like every aspect of it is like, there is no server. It's a serverless game and it's all run on the chain. there's a lot of issues with like latency and stuff because then you have to wait for like finality, and that's where I think the ZK stuff comes into play. Where if it's like a fully on-chain game, it's supposed to like reduce that latency. I think with Paima, like they've built their core game loop on the chain. Like the game logic is on chain for the battles. The pets are on chain. They're tradable, etc. When we think about the games that we have in our funnel, we have tons of Web 2 games that we're working with and helping them get into Web 3. We were thinking about like what actually makes sense, right? Really easy assets. The assets in the game, some should be tradable, some shouldn't. There should be soft and hard assets in the game. That's usually a pretty easy one. Then when it comes to game logic, it's like usually pretty easy to be like, hey, if this game logic is in some way, shape, or form involved in the distribution of incentives, let's be mindful here of like a cheating vector. Maybe it makes sense to put some of this on chain, implement like a winner VRF or a Super Oracles VRF or whatever. Then the other aspect of it is like just generalized, right? Like generalized things on chain. I think it's really easy if you put things like achievements on chain, right? So you're building up like an identity layer almost of the players for them. So it's like, hey, I could be playing. The recent thought experiments I've been thinking about is like, what does a single player Web3 game look like, right? And so like within that aspect, I was like, damn, it's hella satisfying when I'm like playing Final Fantasy or like Halo or whatever, and I get the little trophy. I'm like, oh fuck, the dopamine, bro! It hits so hard with the little notification. But I'm like, oh, that makes sense for like that aspect to be on chain. Like I can mint you like a soulbound NFT that represents your achievement, right? But now like blockchains are very data rich, so I'm like building up this aspect of like, oh man, like Robbie's really good at using magic in all these different games, or he's completed all of the God of War games, and I can check that because of the on chain history to it. So there's a spectrum on that we're looking at. So like I think the point of what I'm trying to say on this is like there's no clear answer. There's different aspects of the game that you can put on chain. I think over time, as we get better about building games on chain, and once that goes and continues, I think we're going to establish better standardized frameworks of like what should be on chain and what shouldn't. I think generally like having achievements on chain is something you can put on anything. And then again, going back to the other aspect of it, like I would urge people is, hey, if you have some game logic that is going to be used in distribution of incentives, try to put that on chain so you reduce the vectors there.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I think as more games go on chain, they'll start to converge around these standards. And that's what unlocks what I'm most excited about with on-chain gaming, which is composability. Like when my modular penguin can enter like XAI Gaming, and then I can also use my penguin in another blockchain and another game. And like now I have this universal character that I can use across all of these games. Like that is what I'm most excited about, because then worlds collide and we can start to see like this intertwinement of different worlds, different incentives, different models, different designs. And I don't know how that happens or what it takes to make that happen, but I think it's a bootstrapping problem. I think like that requires multiple games to live on chain and interact with one another. And you only get that level of composability after you have maybe like a certain inflection point. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 5 games that are able to interact with one another.
No, the composability aspect is huge, and like cross-selling is huge. Like the thing when I find it funny sometimes when like people on Twitter are like, oh, I'm so bearish on crypto gaming. And like I think part of that rationale comes from the fact that gaming, like everyone's been saying for years, like crypto gaming. Games take hella long, bro. So games take hella long, take longer than market cycles. And market cycles, as we all know in crypto, are like the most soul crushing and euphoric thing. It's like the extreme aspect of the spectrum. You'll make like life-changing amounts of money, and then all of a sudden you're a victim of like the biggest financial fraud the history of the United States and the country has ever seen. And it's like no in between. Right. And I think sometimes people let their emotions cloud that judgment as well. But, most of these games that I've been following since 21 are going to release this year. And the 3-year development life cycle is not that long for a game. But I just think about like even beyond just, hey, it makes sense from like the way games work and all this stuff. This idea of like right now, if I'm playing a game from the same same kind of developer or publisher, there's not much of an added bonus for me for like that loyalty aspect of it. One thing that I loved about there was this one aspect of games where like based on how your ending was in like God of War, you got like another, there was this small trend in gaming for a second where like if you had a certain save or like a certain ending in the previous game, it impacted your second game. They kind of shied away from that, but I really like that composability of like within the same catalog of games. And so I think composability, you've already seen that composability is like difficult to do in Web 2, but it was cool. Like I love some of those experiences, and I do think the composability aspect of these games is going to be awesome. But the point is, the standardization needs to be there, and we don't really know what that's going to look like. That's probably like a several year time horizon on where we try to figure that out as an industry.
Right. And for now, it's like, yeah, for now, it's just like you control your execution environment. You get way higher throughput, super cheap transactions on an L3. People are going to come to sidechain to play. It's not like they're going to like, my point is that it's not like a Uniswap where, you have to be on the general purpose chain to get users. It's like people are going to come to the chain from the outside funnel or from crypto native people and go directly to your chain for one use case. But eventually it's going to be a point where people are going to want to play multiple games across multiple individualized execution environments, as you're saying. And that standard is yet to be kind of set.
Yeah, there's on the Arbitrum roadmap, there's chain clusters that work. So we're exploring that stuff as well. But it's a good problem to have, right? Like if you have an app chain that's like doing really well for us, we're really excited about building on top of Arb because it just makes it so much cheaper. And for like the stuff that people are doing on our chain, I think it's like a good trade-off. But that's like another thing I've noticed is like a lot, like even gaming at scale on Arb1 is too prohibitive with the cost. Like
Definitely.
Gas is on Zai, gas is used as Zai. There's like a gas subsidy contract. We're focusing on all these things to make sure that we're solving problems and reducing friction. I think the whole aspect of reducing friction, like that thesis was very validated when the Zai testnet went live, and it scaled to like 5 million something transactions a day without a hiccup, like sub 200 millisecond block time, and like a few 100,000 wallets. And that was without, like, we didn't announce there was an airdrop or nothing. It was just very easy for you to get started, create a wallet, get started, and play the games. And we're like, okay, like we're onto something here. Like reducing the friction is maybe the friction is the bottleneck. There's a content aspect where we need better content, better games, but it doesn't even matter how good your game is if I have to like jump through a bunch of hoops to get there.
Yeah, I agree completely. Another cool thing about Arbitrum Orbit that our audience may want to know or may have previously understood from the podcast with Steven from Offchain Labs is that in Arbitrum Orbit chains, if there's no transactions, you don't have to pay for the block space each block. So Zai as an entity, as a foundation, then as like however it's separated, right? There's that is another kind of advantage from the Arbitrum Orbit perspective, which again makes things more scalable and more cost effective for both the users and the team. Now, speaking more on Arbitrum, Arbitrum's DAO is really awesome for supporting builders. Talk to us a bit about your plans for garnering some support with Arbitrum. I know it might be still a bit under wraps or in the late stages, but
yeah, I mean, first of all, I hella disagree with you.
Expect?
I disagree with you. The DAO being friendly towards builders, that is not the case at all. This shit is egregious, and like I know the point of that. I want to add a point of that is like the people in the DAO really care. I'm obviously a contributor to the DAO as well. People really care, but there's like a lot of friction right now in terms of like there's almost as many freaking Telegram chats as there are perp dexes right now. It's getting like a little out of hand, right? We have like one of the biggest projects on Arb, and I actually don't even know how to get a grant, where to go to. It's confusing as shit, and I'm in like every chat, reading everything. It's horrible, and it needs to change, and it's going to change. I think people are starting because it's an experiment, right? And it's actually decentralized is the other aspect of it. It's surreal to me when I get on calls, like governance calls, and there's like 50 people spread across the world all coming to showing up. There's people like L2 Beat and Christoph and those guys that do awesome work. There's Joseph from Axis who does awesome work. There's Matt from Stable Labs that does awesome work. I think the issue is just it's a lot of work to put on to a founder to do something. Like it's a full-time job to do something with the DAO. We're co-authored with Treasure and Dan from Vela. Shout out to Dan from Vela and the Savvy DeFi guys. They helped a lot. Tremendous amount of help trying to put this proposal together. It's going to go on the forum soon. And just trying to establish this gaming framework and ecosystem for art, because I truly think it's the best tech stack. And they're better off like having people like us and Treasure go evangelize other developers, because we know about gaming, and kind of outsource this diligence process to people that are actually building these games and publishing these games. But yeah, the excited to work with the DAO on this stuff. Excited to change how founders work with the DAO. There's a Delphi and Blockworks proposal that's out for the new council thing that I'm really looking forward to supporting. Just because I think that the struggle is like, dude, I'm already working like 14, 16-hour weeks, and like I have a girlfriend who's like really sweet and patient, but that, I still have to like try to live a normal life, and I just can't. Like I'm already overworked and doing all this stuff. If you add, there's just not enough time in the day. I'm willing to make that sacrifice, but there's just simply not enough time in that day. So I think we're getting better in the DAO about scaling up and figuring out how do we work with founders, because at the end of the day, the only people that can empathize with founders are other founders or people who have done it before. And I think those people are too busy building their protocols to be involved on the DAO stuff. But we have a lot of good council members. I think you guys are getting involved as well. So looking forward to that. But I think so far the reaction from the DAO around the gaming stuff has been good. But it's been really interesting. What I will say, it's been really interesting to understand how little people actually know about gaming. And it's a huge education opportunity, which is really cool. But I was surprised by that. It's all DeFi, but I was very surprised by that. There's some people that go like, oh, Arbitrum should just stick to focusing on DeFi. And I'm like, dude, does the App Store only have financial apps on there? Like, this makes no sense.
Dude, there's easily a world where XAI has more users than all of Arbitrum One just on its own chain in like less than 2 years. Obviously, you guys would have to freaking hit everything right, but like gaming brings on people more than like any freaking pont, for lack of a better term, can. So it's like, but I think Rob agrees as well. We've gone through the hoops of governance in Arbitrum, other ecosystems as well. Generally, just DeFi governance and DAO governance is a bit of a hassle, but it is what it is to kind of get the decentralized systems churning. Don't want to get stuck up too much on here as we kind of close out in the coming minutes. Would love to learn more about you guys bringing on Camelot to XAI chain, how that looks like. And also if there's any alpha for if you guys do get ARB rewards, or how those may be used for users, as well as some alpha for this Camelot launch.
Yeah, good question. So Camelot's coming. It's going to be the Dex on XAI. Really excited about that. Love the Camelot guys. Great team. Iron Boots and the rest of the dudes. Absolute chads. We're going to be their first ever third-party deployment. We're super stoked about it. To be honest with you, we're going to, even if we get the ARB rewards or we don't, we're going to stick steadfast in our mission to just bring awesome games to XAI. You're going to have like a lot of announcements coming over the next few days, few weeks on infrastructure providers, strategic partners around gaming, game publishers, etc. We've been at it for like several years, and now this is the time to start executing and delivering on stuff. Yeah, and so that is like the situation for us, at least, is like we're not like, to be honest with you, I am not betting my chips on the DAO giving us like funds. We have such a good relationship with game developers, and building out, like, the foundation is building out some ecosystem fun stuff, all this exciting stuff going on, that I think independent of what happens, things are going to be great. If the DAO stuff happens, even better. But really, the idea is to be very mindful about where we're spending, how we're spending. And gaming has like a very established way to do these things, right? Like on XPopular side, my co-founder has like a 17-year crazy history in gaming, ran like IGN's indie game incubator, like pushed over 1 billion installs. So we have tons of good gaming DNA. I think we're one of the few teams that have like deep crypto experience and deep gaming experience, which is why we've been executing so well. But it's going to be a really exciting year, basically, for Zeiss, and really looking forward to it.
We're so early, Rob.
We're
so early.
I'm stoked. Let's go, man. Yeah, appreciate you coming on, and would love to keep the conversation rolling as on-chain gaming continues to evolve. You guys are pushing the envelope on both the tech blockchain side as well as the gaming side. So best of luck, and love keep up the good work. Love it.
Appreciate you
make
guys.
Arbitrum the home of gaming, the DeFi hub and the gaming hub.
Yes, sir. Let's do it. Anything is
One day.
possible in Arbitrum.